if he wasn't eligible, and this was just a matter of legislation that he wouldn't be eligible, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives would be all over this.
We've spoken with campaign managers and politicians about this election, and the phrase that we hear the most often is, "This is the craziest election I have ever seen in my entire life." And that statement could not be more accurate, with the amount of scandals already coming out, the crazy polls, and the blatant media bias. However, there are many false claims that have been circulating the internet as well, and given the number of emails that we're receiving about them, we thought it would be good to tackle them in this video so that you know that they are false, and most importantly, why they're false.
Let's take a look at the first claim, the Carney crypto scam. So, ladies and gentlemen, you will no doubt be traversing Facebook at some point over the course of this election, and you may run across a Facebook ad by many different accounts, and the highlight is going to state the following. Breaking, Carney took Trump by surprise today with his announcement on Canada's stunning retaliatory tariff plan. Once you click on that link, which you should not, you will be taken to this website, which poses to be a CBC News website. But one of the things that you can actually see at the very top is this is definitely not cbc.ca. It is a completely different domain name, and that is your first clue that this is a problematic site. Now, what it says here is Mark Carney announces unexpected retaliatory tariffs plan in response to Trump's devastating tariff hikes this week. Now, we're not going to bother showing you the rest of the article because it's complete garbage. It is literally BS. What this is a fake news article that is designed to try to get you to click on a link to sign up or register for a crypto scam. And it's designed to get you to spend money or quote unquote invest money, and that you'll be making millions of dollars within 5 to 6 months.
And this is not dissimilar to other scams that we've reported on in the past, also with ads coming from Facebook or YouTube, where they use somebody that you may trust, such as a political figure, like maybe Pierre Poilievre or Justin Trudeau have been targets in the past. And they use that trust that you have with this politician to try to then make it seem like this is a legitimate news article, this is real, this is happening, and then you fall for the scam.
And the interesting thing is the scammers are actually trying to combine the platform of Pierre Poilievre as well as Mark Carney. And I guess they think they're being clever by calling it the Can First plan, whereas Pierre has his Canada First plan and Mark Carney has Canada Strong. And they're combining Mark Carney's logo with the slogan and label for the Conservative platform. Anyhow, this is complete garbage. Whenever you're hearing something that says, hey, you can make millions of dollars or even hundreds of thousands of dollars or even tens of thousands of dollars within a matter of months, all you have to do is give us your money, you know that it is a complete scam. So many people are not falling for it, which is great, and they're commenting on these posts and calling them out. But this is your public service announcement that anything about any politician in this election that is even remotely related to something like this, stay away from it, don't click on it, and just report it to the social media platform that you actually see it on.
And speaking of social media, we've had a dupe of Northern Perspective come up Facebook trying to friend people and send them DMs. Please remember that Northern Perspective will never, ever try to friend you or send you DMs. If you are getting anything from an account that appears to be Northern Perspective, it's a scam. Please don't respond to it. All of our correspondence is done through our official email address.
And it's not that we don't want to friend everybody. We love everybody in NP Nation, but
it's to keep everyone safe.
Right. So moving on to the next false claim. Now, this has probably been the most prevalent in the last couple of weeks, and this is a claim that makes the statement that Mark Carney is actually ineligible to run for Prime Minister due to a act of Parliament referred to as Section 32.
I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah. So this is an example that has been posted on Facebook and shared all over the place. So this cites a specific act of Parliament, Section 32 of that act, and it's essentially saying that he is unable to actually run. Now, we were wondering where this originated from, and the good thing is the original people who actually started posting this gave us a clue at the bottom of this. So let's take a look at the original source of this claim. It actually comes from this website under author Paul W. Kincaid, and it says Section 32 of the Parliament of Canada Act made Mark Carney ineligible to be Liberal leader or a member of Parliament. In the article, it cites the actual act of Parliament and it shows you the text. And just so you know that this is actually accurate in this, we wanted to show you this from the Justice of Canada website. So as you can see here, Section 32 says, except as specially provided in this division, A, no person accepting or holding any office, commission, or employment, permanent or temporary, in the service of the Government of Canada, at the nomination of the Crown, or at the nomination of any of the officers of the Government of Canada, to which any salary, fee, wages, allowance, emolument, or profit of any kind is attached, and B, no sheriff, registrar of deeds, clerk of the peace, or county crown attorney in any of the provinces is eligible to be a member of the House of Commons or shall sit or vote therein. This is essentially the nuts and bolts of this. Now, let's go on to see what Paul Kincaid actually stated as his justification for this.
Government advisors are typically paid, and their salaries can vary depending on their role, experience, and the specific government entity they work for. For almost 5 years, Mark Carney was paid by the Government of Canada for serving the Trudeau government as an economic advisor. Last September, Mark Carney joined the Liberals as an economic advisor and chair of a Liberal Party task force on economic growth. Mark Carney didn't volunteer his services. Mark Carney abused his role in the Trudeau government to obtain financial benefits for himself and for his business associates. Mark Carney used influence peddling to obtain government contracts for Brookfield Asset Management. From August 2020 to January 2025, Mark Carney worked for Brookfield Asset Management. In September 2024, when he joined the Liberals as an economic advisor and the chair of a Liberal Party task force on economic growth, Carney was chair and head of transition investing for Brookfield. Influence peddling, also known as traffic of influence or trading in influence, is the practice of using one's connections with government or authorities to obtain favors or preferential treatment for another, often in return for payment, and is often associated with corruption.
So, what's the problem here? There's a couple of things. So number one, the author makes the claim that Mark Carney was paid for advising the Trudeau government from 2020 to 2025. Because he is referring back to Section 32, where it says if you're essentially being paid, you cannot be eligible to run for office or for the leader of a party. The issue is that the author doesn't provide any evidence or cite any evidence as to the fact that he was paid. And we haven't done a complete deep dive on this, and we'll get to the reason for that later, but from our cursory search, we cannot find any evidence that Mark Carney was actually paid for this role. Second, he says that Mark Carney was appointed to be the advisor of the Liberal Party. Well, that has nothing to do with the government, and we commented on the splitting hairs of this semantics about this when this actually happened, but you have to look at this technically on its merit, and he was not actually appointed to the government, he was appointed to the Liberal Party. Other people will also point to the fact that he was the UN Special Envoy for Climate Change, as Mark Carney loves to tell everybody. Well, the issue is he was not appointed by the Canadian government in that regard. He was appointed by the United Nations themselves. So he actually was not representing Canada in that role. And in the role that he was with the government of 2020 to 2025, it actually doesn't even really matter that he was paid at all. Why is that? Well, because if you look at Section 32 again, it says no person accepting or holding office, commission, etc., etc., etc. Basically, if you've been appointed and if you're holding office and you're getting paid for it, you can't run or sit in the House of Commons.
Well, and that means simultaneously. So if you've resigned your role as, say, head of a government agency in order to run for office and become a member of parliament, that is permitted. We know people who have done it. And take, for example, it mentions that you cannot be a crown attorney and also a sitting MP. Take Larry Brock, for example. He is formerly a crown attorney. He's not a crown attorney right now. He's an MP right now. So it seems that you can resign your post and then go on to become an MP. This isn't like a lifetime barring that maybe you've been appointed the head of an agency in the past that you're not allowed to run for government in the future.
Right. So the claim that he's ineligible because he was working for the government of Canada, paid or unpaid, is actually completely irrelevant because he had resigned all roles of that when he decided to run for the Liberal Party of Canada. So it doesn't apply here. So the problem is people are misunderstanding or misrepresenting, one or the other, what Section 32 of the Parliament Act actually means. So is he eligible to run? Yeah. And here's the other point that we always throw out with when rebutting this is that if he wasn't eligible, and this was just a matter of legislation that he wouldn't be eligible, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives would be all over this, and they wouldn't have waited to the election. They would have been all over this back in January when he announced his campaign.
Right.
So this is a false story. It's incorrect, and it shouldn't be taken seriously at all, because it doesn't line up with the facts. And as we keep saying, there's enough scandals to go around about the Liberals and Mark Carney without, trying to manufacture new ones. Now, let's get to the next scandal, which is the $40 billion theft by the Liberals from the Governor General. So this started circulating on the internet a couple of weeks ago. I think it was last week, actually. Because this was dropped on April the 1st. Ironically, April Fool's. So this is a order in council that was published via the Governor General, and this is what it says.
Whereas the president of the Treasury Board reports that there is no appropriation for the payment of sums mentioned in the schedule, amounting in the aggregate to $40,343,209,650, and the appropriate ministers have reported that the payment of these sums is urgently required for the public good. And whereas Parliament is not in session and there is no other appropriation under which payment of these sums may be made, therefore, Her Excellency the Governor General in Council, on the recommendation of the President of the Treasury Board under subsection 31 of the Financial Administration Act, directs the preparation of a special warrant to be signed by the Governor General authorizing the payment effective April 1st, 2025, of the sums mentioned in the schedule, amounting in the aggregate to $40,343,209,650 to the Consolidated Revenue Fund. So first, to understand what all this means, I think we need to look at the parliamentary financial cycle, and Ryan's going to explain that for us.
So this is the advantage of having worked in the government previously. So this is actually taken from the Green Book, which they have posted online. Let's start in February. Why are we starting in February? Well, because that is when the budget presentation is supposed to happen. So in all companies, and the government is just one big company, you plan for your budget months and months in advance. Now, for government budgets, spoiler alert, agencies and the government itself would start to be talking about the budget all the way back in October of that previous year. And since the government financial cycle goes from April 1st to March 31st, not the calendar year of January 1st to December 31st, this is why this seems a little skewed. So budget presentation happens in February, and then the tabling of the main estimates for that budget happens March 1st. So this happens in OGO. We've kind of covered this before. This also happens in the Standing Committee of Public Accounts and Finance and many of the other committees. And they go over these estimates as to what agencies are expected to receive when it comes to these estimates in terms of a dollar figure. Now, the most important aspect here is that one of the justifications that people are saying, oh, well, you know, Parliament was prorogued and the Liberals are stealing money, and how are they able to get this money and all of this? And people are actually pointing to some facts that are correct and that we've talked about on Northern Perspective, which is any new money in a parliamentary cycle must be voted on and approved within the House of Commons via a supply vote. So that is correct. Now, here's the thing, and we've talked about this even during our prorogation coverage. The challenge here, and this is why Justin Trudeau actually set prorogation to end on March the 24th, is that if he just let prorogation run past that and into June, the government would have run out of money. Why would the government run out of money? Well, the previous budget, which was approved in June of 2024, only funds the government until March 31st. So that's an issue. So what was set to happen on March 28th, and this has been talked about in the media, was that there was going to be what they called a critical supply vote, where Parliament would have to meet and temporarily fund the government so that all of the agencies could get paid. Department of National Defense, Armed Forces, CRA, all of those fun organizations, that they can continue to get paid their salaries and continue to do work. Otherwise, you're not going to be paying all these government employees. The government would shut down, no passports, no D&D, nothing happens. So they would issue this temporary funding via Parliament in order to actually keep the government going until the next budget is approved. Fine. Well, what happened? Mark Carney called an election. That's what happened. And this actually is covered in the eventuality, in the scenarios, in the Green Book and Parliament. Because one of the things that happens when you call an election is you dissolve Parliament. Okay? Well, we all know what that means. That means that Parliament is no longer in session. You don't go to Parliament. There is no votes. There is no bills. There's no nothing. So in this case, when the government's going to run out of money, what do you do?
Well, and for that answer, we go to everybody's favorite book, the House of Commons Practice and Procedure, also called the Green Book. So this is on page 491 and 492 in chapter 18, which is financial procedures. And there's this whole big chapter on all the financial stuff that goes on in government. But the spot that we want to focus on is the Governor General's special warrants. In specific circumstances, the Financial Administration Act allows the Governor and Council to ask the Governor General to issue a quote-unquote special warrant, permitting the government to make charges on the Consolidated Revenue Fund not otherwise authorized by Parliament, provided that the following criteria are met. 1. Parliament is dissolved. 2. A minister has reported that an expenditure is urgently required for the public good. And 3, the president of the Treasury Board has reported that there is no appropriation for the payment. This provision of the Act makes it possible for the government to continue its work during a dissolution. Special warrants may be used only from the date of dissolution until 60 days following the date fixed for the return of the writs after a general election. Furthermore, no special warrants may be issued during that period if Parliament stands prorogued. The Financial Administration Act requires that every special warrant be published in the Canada Gazette within 30 days of its issue. A list of the amount authorized under such a warrant must also be tabled in the House within 15 days of the opening of the next session of Parliament. Because a special warrant is deemed to be an appropriation for the fiscal year in which it is issued, authorization must be included retroactively in the first Appropriation Act passed in that session.
Now, this goes on to say one of the most important aspects of this, for most of their history, special warrants have been issued solely for authorizing emergency expenditures, usually while Parliament was dissolved to allow for a general election. And what you probably caught, what Tanya was reading before, is these warrants cannot be issued while Parliament is prorogued. This is why Justin Trudeau could not extend the prorogation past March 28th, because that was the deadline that the government had for when it was going to run out of money and when it actually needed these funds approved.
It's March 26th, actually, which is why he did it a few days earlier. He ended prorogation on March the 24th. However, Mark Carney called an election, thereby dissolving Parliament on March the 23rd, and that's why they were able to use these special warrants.
So the Liberals are not stealing money. They're not trying to fund anything nefarious. This is actually a normal part of a lot of elections when there's a snap election and you're in the middle of funding approval. And it's to allow the government to continue to run so it doesn't shut down and that there isn't mass disruption across the country. Now we get to the final claim of this series, which is voting twice with 2 voter ID cards.
So we received a few emails this morning regarding the same topic, and one of them had a photo attached to it. It was a screenshot of something that was floating around Facebook, and the screenshot alleges that a particular voter who was the only member of the family who was a registered voter to the Liberal Party received 2 Elections Canada cards in the mail. So the first thing I noticed about this picture was that the address information was completely covered up. Probably a smart thing if you are sharing a photo of personal information on the internet, but it also doesn't prove the claim that's being made in the post, which is that the same person received 2 voter cards. You can have 2 people in the household. For example, Ryan and I, we each receive a voter card in the mail, but without being able to see the person's name, we can't verify that it was the same person who received 2 voter information cards. The next thing that is very important to note here is that a voter information card is not your ballot. The voter information card merely lets you know that you are registered and that you are registered to vote at that address. It also has voting information such as the dates and times of the advance polls, the date and time of the election itself, and also what your polling station is. They typically print them and mail them 3 weeks before the general election so that they will get to people in time for the advanced polls. Sometimes there are misprints. Sometimes the registry is not correct. So for example, if you've moved recently, your voter card may be sent to your old address. You might not get one at your new address. If you've just turned 18, you might not get one. So it's a really good idea to go to www.elections.ca and check out the registration. You can check to make sure that you're registered and that you're registered at the correct address. The voter information card, again, functions as an information card. It tells you where your polling station is, what the times are, etc. And it can also function as a piece of ID. So when you go to the polling station, you can show your voter information card plus another piece of ID. They will cross you off the list. Even if you receive 2 of them and do try to fraudulently vote twice, you're going to be going to the same polling station and they're going to be already having you crossed off the list, wondering why you're trying to vote again. So obviously you don't do that.
Right. And from what we've learned from Elections Canada, because we've talked to them about some of these things in the past, is that there are many controls to ensure that voter fraud does not happen. And if this scenario did occur where you show up with a voter card and they have you already crossed off the list, they're going to be asking some questions, and this can lead to jail time and heavy fines. The good news is Elections Canada and the Canadian federal election is one of the most secure elections in the world, and the people at Elections Canada, they take pride in that.
Absolutely. And I think this is a great reminder for all of us to go to elections.ca and check our registration before April the 22nd, because that is the cutoff for that. If you do have issues the day of while you are trying to vote, please alert the staff. But if you can check your registration ahead of April the 22nd, that's what they're recommending.